I'm a big fan of Spike Lee films. I enjoy the way he tells a story. I like the way he presents, points and makes comments about the African American community. I like the way his films are shot, the cinematography, because the pictures are very unique, and I enjoy the overall aesthetic of his films. However, when it comes down to this new film, Chiraq, I have a few issues with the way he's marketing the film and to the premise of it altogether. With the premise of the film, he's saying that if the black women go on a sex strike, it'll stop all the violence in Chicago. Now, I understand that the film is a satire and a parody, but when I listen to that premise, because I've heard this premise, presented before, from another author talking about Latin gangs, and I read that about 97, 98 when I was promoting my first book, trying to sell it. Um, I looked at that and I said, no, that's not going to stop violence with men. See, one of the big arguments that a lot of women have, and this is a very, very feminine argument, that the men are out here being violent because of women. And the women, if they deny these men sex, they will stop being violent. Well, that's not the case at all. What makes a lot of these men, especially in the African American community, violent is not, them fighting over women. They're fighting because they were raised by dysfunctional women. You see, the woman is the first teacher of culture. And where do the boys learn these models for behavior from? They learn them from women. And a lot of these males who are raised in single mother households never learn how to, you know, problem solve. They never learn how to resolve conflict. They never learn how to deal with things in a constructive manner because in their world, what's modeled for them are emotions. And women are mostly emotional. They're loud, they get argumentative, they get incredibly difficult to deal with. And that's what causes these boys to be violent because they never learn a constructive way on how to resolve problems, how to solve problems, because the women who were the first teachers of culture don't know how to do it. The men who were raised by them and fathered them don't know how to do it. And that's what makes these boys, out here being dysfunctional and not knowing how to problem solve. The reason why a lot of these males go out here and start shooting is again, they do not know how to navigate through their emotions when they're feeling bad. And what they mean by navigating through your emotions is, yes, you're angry, yes, you're upset, yes, you feel bad about things, but you do not act on them. And the big problem with your Afro-American Negro male is that he has a very, very low impulse control, and that he may be feeling angry and upset, and he'll go out and act on that impulse instead of thinking about, the long term consequences of his actions. If I go out and shoot Ray Ray, the police are going to come and get me, and I'm going to do 25 years in prison for shooting Ray Ray. He doesn't think about that. No, he thinks Ray Ray is talking to my girl. I have to make Ray Ray stop talking to my girl. And the fastest way to make him stop talking to my girl is with my 9 millimeters of courage. That's the way many of your Afro American Negro males think. They don't think about, resolving the problem. They don't think about solving the problem. They don't think, let me go ask Shaniqua why is she talking to Ray Ray when and ask that kind of question, or let me go and approach the conversation and see what's going on. He doesn't think about that. He doesn't have the kind of thinking skills, to sit down and think about that. And that's the big problem with a lot of your Afro American Negro males. They have no ability to think. They just go on impulse. And that's why you have so much violence in African American communities. And I can talk about that because again, when I was a teenager, I live here in New York, and we were going through the crack epidemic, and black men were pretty much killing each other like roaches here in New York in the late 80s and the early 90s. And some people would say it's part of the crack epidemic, but yeah, that was part of it with the guys, these dope dealers. But a lot of these dope dealers, again, they came from these single mother households. And in these single mother households, a lot of these males, again, were taught a culture where they never learned problem solving, critical thinking, reasoning, conflict resolution. And that's why these guys would go into a club, with their dope money. They would see their girlfriend talking to some guy. They would start a fight with the guy. Then here comes the 9 millimeters of courage. And because this guy can't think critically and say, you know what, I don't own this woman, I don't control this woman, He goes out, kills one guy's dead, the other one's in prison, and doing 25 to life, and none of these guys ever think about the consequences of their actions. And that's what's causing your black man to be violent. But, Spike puts it out there in this parody, that if the women deny the man sex, that's going to make him stop being violent. That's not the case at all. Again, if this man is raised in a dysfunctional way, if he's raised with dysfunctional values, that's what makes him violent. That's what makes him out of control. And that's why, when I think about the movie, yes, it's going to probably be an entertaining movie, and I urge people to go see it. But it barely skims the surface of what makes these Afro-American Negro men violent. What makes them violent is the culture that they're taught, the models that they're taught for behavior, and the way they are raised. Because I look at the way we raise males, and a lot of them, again, over the last 50 years, have been raised with a overly close attachment to their mothers, and that's why these men are very emotional and very, they take things very personally. They get very heated. They get very hot. And they have very little, again, self control. And because they have very little self control, they act impulsively and act in ways that are detrimental to their own benefit. Now, a man who has been raised, with a father in his father's going to tell him things that are going to help him. He's going to teach him things that are going to help him, that he has to learn how to control his emotions. He has to learn, how to think before he acts. He has to learn, how to control his actions so that he doesn't act in a way that hurts him long term but benefits him long term. And if there's a conflict, he tries to find a constructive way to resolve it, not running up on people, looking for an adversarial confrontation. He's looking for, a diplomatic way to solve the problem. And if the, in cases like many of these cases that, Spike Lee thinks that these females, you know, if the female is just like that, you just leave her alone and you move on. It doesn't mean that you're a weak guy. It means you have the strength of character to do what is in your best interest. And if this female wants to go out here and deal with other people, then let her go deal with other people. This is something that your Afro-American Negro male, because he's so caught up in his own pride and his own ego, he doesn't think about, his long-term benefits and his long-term, things like his own personal health, his own mental health, and, his own physical well-being and his own physical safety. No, he puts that, you know, he doesn't make that a priority. A regular man will say, look, my physical health, my mental health, and, my well-being are a priority. But your Afro-American Negro man, again, because the way he's raised in these single mother households, he doesn't make that a priority. Instead, he is living, again, because he has a queen complex towards, pleasing women and making women happy. And that is part of it. And that's something that Spike, I think, that doesn't really understand, fully, that's what some of these guys think, because again, they were raised in these single mother households. But that's not the general reason. Again, that's not what makes them violent. And a sex strike, that's not really going to stop these men from being violent. That's a nice premise, and I saw that premise done several times. And I saw it proposed in another book, when a book that some woman was proposing. But that's not what makes these men, that's not going to have any effect on these men. Sex strike is not going to have any effect on these men because, again, men do not live for sex alone. It's not the only thing that they live for. But that's really, a slap in the face to say that African American men, that's all they live for, is a black woman's genitals. That's all she lives for. No, that's not the case at all. The problem with your Afro-American man is that, again, he has no self-control and no self-discipline. I know I keep repeating it, but that's what I've seen, growing up as a kid, going to places like IS 148 and Park West High School. That's what I see, out here right now. I see guys with, the minute somebody says something to them or pushes their buttons, they start to explode instead of, learning how to problem solve or just brush something off. I mean, I've had a lot of things said to me over the years. I had to learn to just ignore it and move on. But a lot of men never learn to come to that point. Instead, they just act out. And I have a family member who works in education who sees, children as low as 4, 5, and even 3 years old who have these same problems. But I look at that, I look at this and I say, the violence in the black community, again, is caused by these single mothers. And I think that's in some way Spike is side skirting that issue and trying to make it, about this sex strike. And then later on, he goes on in another article talking about, how, you know, something about yes means yes rape laws or something that if they had a sex strike on campus it would stop rapes. And I'm sitting there going, you know I thinking he's taking a ride on the simp train, because I read another study. I was watching a Sandman video and I was reading another study that said, when women did these yes means yes things, a lot of the men just walked away. And those feminists were sitting there angry because the men weren't paying them any more attention. They said that, look, there's other people they could go and talk to. There's other people they can go and deal with. And they stopped dealing with the women on campus. They just found another circle of women to go deal with. And that's what I believe would happen if these Afro-American Negro women decided they would go on a sex strike to stop violence with black men. Black men would just go find another circle of women to go deal with and go associate with. Because what a lot of these people, don't understand is that there are 4 women on earth for every 1 man, and women want sex more than men. So there's always going to be somebody out there to provide or meet sexual needs of any man out here. And all the women who go on strike are going to do is wind up being, ignored and discarded, just like what happened on these college campuses to these feminists who went there talking about yes means yes, and we're going to go after you and all this stuff. What those men did is that they found another pool of women to go deal with. They stopped dealing with the women on campus and found another pool of women or another women outside of the campus to go deal with. And this is something that would probably happen. But what's going to stop, your violence in your inner cities is basically what happened here in New York. We had to just pretty much, crack down on all the criminals in the community. And what the African American community is going to have to do is start realizing that we can't keep enabling and supporting dysfunctional behaviors in black men. And this is, again, goes back to your Afro American woman. She is a number one enabler of dysfunctional and codependent behaviors in African American men. And what she does is, by teaching him this culture that he needs to depend on her, he needs to submit to her, he needs to defer to her, is teaches this man how to be weak. And then other things that she does is she supports many of the gangs in her community. She supports many of the dope dealers in her community. And from the mother to the girlfriend, they all live to enjoy the benefits of these criminal activities. They're the ones sitting there, wearing the Air Jordan tennis shoes, the shearling coats, riding around in the Jeeps, and they are the ones who enable this behavior. This Negro male, you know, he does a lot of this stuff again because he wants to please the woman, and because he has been taught dysfunctional culture by this woman. So she is one of the core, problems of it. And what's going to cause this man to stop being violent, is her not going along with his dope dealing, her going along with his gang violence. And that has nothing to do with sex. That has to do with the culture she was taught and her taking all these benefits, from these men, stop using these men as tools, because she basically uses these men as tools to get what she wants. And these men pretty much, they're out here selling dope because some of them want to get her attention, some of them, want to win her favor, and they're doing this, for those reasons. But I look at this, the way he's marketing this film, and it's really simpish, it's really backwards, and it shows, a little bit of desperation that because he probably fears that he's lost ground to your Tyler Perry's and your Lee Daniels. I don't think he should be trying to go to market towards those groups. He should be focused on the message of a film and, what he used to be focused on. But he's literally looking at the box office, you know. But I look at the African American community overall, and, sex strike, again, is not going to stop African American men from being violent. And a lot of people out here think that, black men are all about sex, and that's that's like a racist thing to say about black people, about black men, because that's what white liberals say about black men. That's what white racists say about black men, that all black men want is sex, and that, that's basically playing into the brute caricature in some ways. But what makes a black man violent, again, is the culture that he is taught by his mother and the women in his community, and the fact that they support that violent culture. They enable that violent culture. They're the ones saying, you know what, you selling dope is cool. You selling dope is okay. You shooting, Ray Ray over what he said to me, because that's another thing that these women do, is the acceptable, way to resolve problems. Um, you getting into fights over me to defend my honor, that's acceptable. It's that culture that he has been taught by the women in his community, and I believe that that's what's been sidestepped, in this Chiraq movie. I mean, if I wrote a story, I would be talking about that, because I look at the picture from a, much, much broader perspective, and I see the culture that is taught, over the last 25, 30 years, because I grew up in that culture, and I saw, these guys, this is what they would do. I'm going to go, fight over this female. I'm going to go defend this female's honor. I'm gonna, fight over this girl that I like. I'm gonna try to get brownie points with her. Um, and when my fists can't win the fight, here I come with my 9 millimeters of courage and my inability to aim a pistol properly, and then I go out and kill up a bunch of people because he has low impulse control, no control over his emotions, and he doesn't think long term, and he doesn't think critically about the long term decisions and ramifications of his actions. And that's what makes this Negro male, messed up. And I think, these are the issues that need to be, talked about, regarding your black communities in like Chicago, because we had the same problem here in New York. And sadly, the only way to solve that problem with many of these Negro males was a timeout in your New York State, penitentiary system. And sadly, even after that, many of these Negro males come right back out and do the exact same thing. They never really learn, because that culture that was taught to them early on by that single mother remains embedded in their mind. They do not understand that, the approaches that you are applying do not work towards problem solving, they do not work towards conflict resolution. And you being an emotional, violent prone person, you know, is what's causing you to wind up in the same situations over and over again. But I look at the Chiraq film and I say, yeah, go see it, go take a critical look at it. But I have an issue with the way he's marketing the film, really trying to pander to women, really trying to present, things from a female, oriented perspective. He's trying to, pander to that Tyler Perry, Lee Daniels crowd, and I really don't think that's the crowd you should be going for. I believe he's a lot more intelligent than that, and he should, try to talk about, the real root causes of this violence. But I think he's afraid of confronting this black woman, like many of these other, Negroes out here. They're afraid of confronting this black woman out of fear that she won't spend her dollars at the box office, or she will be offended in some way. I look at that, and I understand that, and I've had to deal with that as a publisher. But I understand that, sometimes you just have to tell the truth, because that's what people need to hear, and that's what they need to know. You can't tell them what they want to hear. You have to tell them what they need to know. Um, I've had people, threaten not to buy my books because I said things about black women, but I'm not afraid to say those things about black women. I understand that, sometimes the truth hurts, but then the people who, some of them do get upset, but then others will take that same information and grow from that information and learn from that information. And that's what Spike's films used to do for me. Yes, they were offensive in some ways. A film like Do the Right Thing would be, when I first saw it, I was really offended by it. But when I saw it for the second or third time, I saw the social commentary he was making about the Negro. And when I saw it, in my late 30s, I really truly saw the commentary he was making about this Afro-American Negro, and the statements he was making about him, and, the honest truth that he was making about this Afro-American Negro. And it takes, some people, and they're never that that's what that some people may never get it, but others may, and that's why you say what you need to say, and you put your message out there, and you don't, water it down by pandering to people. You just put what you say or you're going to say out there, and if some people take it, they take it, and if they don't, they don't. But that's all part of art. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.